They blocked my only way out, so I gave them a road they could never escape. It sounds dramatic when I say it like that, I know, but if you had stood where I stood that Monday morning, coffee still warm in your hand, boots half-laced, staring at a wooden barricade going up where your life used to flow freely, you might have done the same thing. Or maybe you wouldn't. That's kind of the question, isn't it? My name's Daniel Mercer, and for almost 12 years, I lived on a patch of land just outside a place called Brook Hollow Estates. If you've ever seen those neighborhoods where every lawn looks like it was trimmed with a ruler and every mailbox matches like it came out of the same catalog, yeah, that kind of place. Except I wasn't part of it. Never was. My land sat just beyond their southern edge, a little rough around the corners, gravel driveway, a workshop out back, a dog that barked at everything that moved. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and more importantly, it was quiet. Well, it used to be. That Monday started like any other. Early light, soft and gray, the kind that makes everything feel slower than it actually is. I remember leaning against the kitchen counter, taking that first sip of coffee, when I heard it, metal clanging, sharp and close, not the kind of distant noise you ignore. This was right there, like someone had dropped a toolbox in my front yard. At first, I figured maybe a delivery truck had gotten turned around, or one of those utility crews was checking lines again. Happens sometimes out in semi-rural areas. But something about it felt off. Too deliberate. Too organized. So I stepped outside. And that's when I saw them. 3 trucks parked right at the end of my gravel drive, blocking the narrow dirt road that connected my property to the county highway. A crew in neon safety vests was unloading steel posts, stacking them neatly like they'd done this 100 times before. And right behind them, half-built already, was a wooden barricade stretching across the road like it had always belonged there. I just stood there for a second, trying to make sense of it, like maybe my brain needed a few extra beats to catch up to what my eyes were seeing. Then I started walking, gravel crunching under my boots, slow at first, then faster as it clicked. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a quick repair job or some survey marking. This was permanent. Hey, I called out when I got close enough, trying to keep my voice level, even though something in my chest had already tightened. What's going on here? One of the guys looked up, mid-hammer swing, like I'd just asked him what time it was. Road closure, he said, casual as anything. HOA order. I remember blinking at him, like maybe I'd misheard. HOA. I repeated. You mean Brook Hollow? He shrugged. That's what the paperwork says. Now here's the thing. I'd lived next to Brook Hollow long enough to know about their rules. Fence heights, paint colors, where you could park your car, when your trash cans had to be out of sight. The kind of stuff that makes some people feel safe and others feel like they're living inside a spreadsheet. But none of that had anything to do with me. I wasn't inside their boundaries. I didn't sign anything. I didn't agree to anything. So I pointed down the road, the one they were blocking. That's my access road, I said. Only way in or out of my property. The guy just wiped his hands on his vest and nodded toward the barricade. Not anymore. And I swear, it wasn't even the words that hit me hardest. It was the way he said them. No edge, no attitude, just simple, final. Like it was already done. By noon, the barricade was finished. White painted wood, clean lines, a metal chain looped through the center and locked tight. And right in the middle, like some kind of official stamp of authority, a sign bolted on with 4 shiny screws. Private community road. No trespassing. I must have read that sign 10 times, standing there in the dust, trying to figure out how something I'd used every single day for over a decade could suddenly not exist. My truck sat behind me in the driveway, useless. Groceries, work, anything beyond that stretch of dirt, cut off. So I did what anyone would do. I called the number on the sign. It rang twice before someone picked up. Brook Hollow Homeowners Association. The voice said, smooth, measured, the kind of tone that doesn't rush for anyone. This is Richard Halden. Yeah, I said, trying to keep my frustration from spilling over too fast. My name's Daniel Mercer. I'm calling about the barricade your crew just put up at the South Access Road. There was a pause, not confused, not surprised, just a pause. Then, yes, Mr. Mercer. I'm aware. Aware. That word sat there for a second. You're blocking my only way out, I said, slower now. That road's the only access my property has to the highway. Another pause, shorter this time. That roadway, he said, carefully, is part of Brook Hollow's internal infrastructure. It has been privately maintained for years, despite being used by non-residents. Non-residents. That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. You've been using it without authorization, he continued, same calm, polished tone. The board has decided to restrict access moving forward for the safety and privacy of our residents. I actually laughed a little at that, not because it was funny, but because it was so neat, so clean, like he'd rehearsed it. You're cutting me off from my own property, I said. That is not our responsibility, he replied. And just like that click, line went dead. I stood there with the phone still in my hand, staring at that barricade like it might somehow explain itself if I looked hard enough. It didn't. And over the next 3 days, it got worse. Way worse. Those next 3 days, they didn't feel real at first. More like I'd somehow slipped into someone else's life. The kind where simple things suddenly take effort you never signed up for, like getting groceries turning into a mile-long hike through waist-high weeds, or leaving for work before sunrise just so I could make it on time after parking my truck down by the county shoulder. And yeah, technically there were other ways out if you really wanted to get creative, cutting across uneven land, squeezing between tree lines, risking a twisted ankle or worse, but none of those were roads, not the kind you trust when something actually matters. And that's the part that started to sit heavy. Not the inconvenience. I could deal with that. It was the idea that if something went wrong, like really wrong, no one was getting to me in time. I remember standing in my driveway that second night, just looking at the house, lights on inside, shadows moving behind the curtains, and thinking, this place I'd spent years building, fixing, shaping into something stable, suddenly felt like an island. Not peaceful island either, the kind you get stuck on. I barely slept. By the third day, the frustration had turned into something sharper, not loud, not explosive, just steady, focused, the kind that doesn't burn out quickly. That morning, I ran into Tom Alvarez. Tom lives about half a mile down from where my road meets the highway, old guy, retired mechanic, the kind of neighbor who doesn't say much unless it matters. I was hauling a couple bags of groceries through the brush when he pulled over in his pickup, rolled the window down, and just looked at me for a second. Well, he said, nodding toward the direction of Brook Hollow. Looks like they finally did it. You knew about this? I asked, dropping the bags in the bed of his truck. He shrugged. Heard talk. HOA's been complaining for years. Traffic, noise, outsiders using their roads. Guess they decided to do something about it. By cutting off my only access. Tom gave a small, dry smile. HOAs don't usually think small. We rode in silence for a bit before he spoke again. You check your paperwork? That caught my attention. What do you mean? Your land, he said. Deeds, surveys, easements, stuff like that. Land around here's older than that neighborhood. Things get messy. I hadn't thought about that in years. When I bought the property, it came with a stack of documents thick enough to stop a bullet, most of which I skimmed once and shoved into a box in the garage. Everything seemed straightforward at the time. Access road was there. Had always been there, so I didn't question it. Maybe I should have. That night, after I got back, same routine, park down the road, carry what I could, curse under my breath more than once. I went straight to the garage. Now, my garage isn't exactly organized, more like controlled chaos. Old tools, spare parts, boxes labeled in a handwriting version of, I'll remember what this means later. It took me a while, digging through dust and old paperwork, until I found it, a long cardboard tube shoved behind a shelf. Inside was the survey map. Yellowed edges, creases running across it like veins, the kind of document that feels older than it probably is. I spread it out on my workbench, smoothing it flat with both hands, leaning in close under the overhead light. At first, it didn't mean much. Lines, measurements, boundary marks, all the usual stuff. Then I saw it. A narrow strip cutting across what is now Brook Hollow Estates, drawn in a slightly different ink, labeled in small, faded lettering. County easement, public right-of-way. I leaned back a little, squinting at it, like maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But it didn't change. That strip, it ran straight through their neighborhood. Not along the edge. Not tucked away where no one would notice. Right through the middle, connecting two larger county roads on opposite sides. Unused. Unpaved. Forgotten. But still there. I remember just standing there for a while, one hand resting on the edge of the table, the other still holding the map, and for the first time since that barricade went up, I felt something shift. Not relief. Not yet. But possibility. The next morning, I drove straight to the county office. Now, if you've ever dealt with a county office, you know it's not exactly a fast-moving machine. Fluorescent lights, quiet hallways, people behind desks who've seen every kind of problem and learned not to react too quickly to any of them. I walked in with that map rolled under my arm, not entirely sure what I was walking into, but knowing I wasn't leaving without answers. I ended up speaking with a woman named Karen Whitfield. Mid-50s maybe, glasses low on her nose, the kind of person who listens more than she talks, which, in that moment, was exactly what I needed. I unrolled the map on her desk and pointed to the strip. "This," I said, "is this still valid?" She adjusted her glasses, leaned in, traced the line with her finger. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "Came with the property. Never paid much attention to it until now." She nodded slowly, then turned to her computer, typing something in, cross-referencing records. The room stayed quiet except for the sound of keys and the occasional hum of the overhead lights. After a minute or two, she stopped. "Well," she said, sitting back slightly, "this is interesting. That's not a phrase you hear from a county official unless something's about to change. The easement is still on record," she continued. "It was designated decades ago for public access, but it was never developed. So it's still usable?" I asked. She gave a small shrug. "Legally, yes. Practically, it would require county approval, surveys, construction." I felt that shift again, stronger this time. "And if someone were to request that?" I said. Karen looked at me for a moment. Not suspicious, not judgmental, just measuring. "Then the county would review it," she said. "Especially if there's a demonstrated need for access." I almost laughed at that. "Demonstrated need," I repeated. "I think I've got that covered." She smiled, just a little. "Then you might want to file a formal request." And just like that, the board flipped. What they took from me in a day, I realized I might be able to take back in a way they never saw coming. The paperwork wasn't instant. Nothing like that ever is. Forms, signatures, site reviews, a process designed to move carefully, not quickly. But once it started, it didn't stop. About 2 weeks later, the first stakes appeared. Bright orange flags driven into the ground along Brook Hollow's quiet streets, cutting a line that most of their residents probably didn't understand yet. I drove by that morning, slow enough to notice the pattern, and I remember thinking, they still don't see it. Not yet. A week after that, the machines showed up. And that's when everything changed. The first thing you notice when heavy machinery rolls into a quiet neighborhood isn't the sound, it's the feeling. Like something's off balance. Like the place itself doesn't quite recognize what's happening to it. Brook Hollow had always been controlled. Predictable. The kind of place where nothing unexpected ever lasted more than a few minutes. But that morning, it didn't matter how perfect their lawns were or how neatly their hedges were trimmed. The second those grading trucks pulled in, that illusion cracked. I parked down the street, leaned against my truck, and just watched. No rush. No hurry. Because for the first time in a while, I wasn't the one reacting. I was the reason things were happening. Crews moved with purpose, same kind of efficiency I'd seen the day they built that barricade. Only now it wasn't my road being closed, it was theirs being opened. Survey lines turned into chalk marks. Chalk marks turned into cuts in the earth. And before noon, that quiet cul-de-sac they'd worked so hard to protect had a strip of raw, torn ground running straight through it like a scar. People started coming out of their houses one by one. At first, it was confusion, hands on hips, quiet conversations, pointing at the equipment like maybe someone would explain it if they stared long enough. Then came the questions, directed at workers who didn't have answers or didn't care to give them. And then came the calls. I didn't have to wait long. My phone buzzed in my pocket just after lunchtime. Richard Halden. I let it ring once, twice, not out of spite, not exactly, just taking a second to appreciate the shift. Then I answered. "Daniel," he said, and for the first time since I'd spoken to him, that polished calm had cracks in it. "We need to talk." I glanced out toward the street, where a backhoe had just started tearing into a section of curb like it wasn't even there. "Looks like we already are," I said. "What is going on?" he asked, sharper now. "There are construction crews on our property." "County property," I corrected. "Public right-of-way." Silence. Not long, but enough. "You filed this," he said finally. "Not a question. I followed the process," I replied. "Same way you followed yours." "That easement hasn't been used in decades," he snapped. "It's not an active roadway." Doesn't need to be, I said. Just needs to exist. Another pause, longer this time. You set this up, he said again, quieter now, but heavier. And that's when I leaned a little harder into the truck, watching as one of the surveyors adjusted a line that ran straight across what used to be someone's perfectly edged front yard. No, I said. You did. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth through the phone. This will destroy the neighborhood, he said. I looked around, dust starting to lift into the air, engines rumbling, the kind of noise that doesn't fade into the background no matter how long it's there. Yeah, I said. Funny how that works. He hung up not long after that. And from there, it didn't slow down. Within days, the transformation was impossible to ignore. That quiet little loop they'd built their lives around turned into a corridor. At first, it was just construction traffic, trucks going back and forth, workers setting the base, laying gravel, marking lanes. But even that was enough to change things. Dust started settling on cars that used to shine. The air carried that constant low rumble of engines. Conversations on back patios got interrupted mid-sentence. And then, the road opened. Not officially, not with a ribbon cutting or anything like that, but word travels fast when there's a shortcut between two busy county highways, especially one that cuts 10 minutes off a morning commute. First came a few cars, cautious, slow, like they weren't sure if they were allowed to be there. Then more. Then a steady stream. By the end of that first week, it was constant. Morning rush started before sunrise. Headlights sweeping across bedroom windows that had never needed curtains before. Delivery vans cutting through midday, tires crunching over fresh gravel. People who had never even heard of Brook Hollow suddenly using it like it had always been part of their route. And with every passing day, that control the HOA had held so tightly slipped a little more. Kids stopped playing in the street. Mailboxes got nudged, then replaced, then nudged again. Street parking disappeared. And the silence, that perfect, curated quiet, was gone. Just like that. They tried to fix it. Of course they did. About a week after the road fully opened, I got another call. Not from Richard this time, but from a woman named Elaine Porter, one of the board members. Softer voice, more careful, the kind of person brought in when things need smoothing over. Daniel, she said, we'd like to discuss a resolution. I already knew what that meant. They want to control back. We're prepared to remove the barricade, she continued. Restore your original access point immediately. I didn't say anything right away. We can also cover the cost of paving your driveway, she added. Full improvement. And, if needed, contribute to landscaping around your property. Trees, fencing, whatever helps maintain. Maintain what? I asked. There was a small pause. Neighborhood harmony, she said. I almost smiled at that. Harmony. Where was that when you locked me out? I asked. That decision was made in the interest of, I know why you made it, I cut in. You just didn't think it all the way through. Silence again. Then, quieter. Are you saying you're not open to negotiation? I looked out across the road. Cars passing steadily now, not slowing, not hesitating. For a second, I thought about it. About how easy it would be to say yes. Get my quiet back. My routine. My normal. But then I remembered those 3 days. Carrying groceries through weeds. Waking up earlier than I should have to walk through mud just to get to work. Standing in my own driveway feeling like I didn't belong there anymore. And more than that, I remembered his voice. That is not our responsibility. So I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. No, I said. I'm not. The call ended shortly after that. And that was it. No more offers. No more negotiations. Just consequences. Now, if you drive through that area today, you won't see the Brook Hollow they built. Not the one they wanted, anyway. You'll see a road that cuts straight through it, busy most hours, loud during the ones that matter. You'll see signs that try to slow things down, speed limits, caution markers, but you can't regulate something once it belongs to everyone. That's the thing about control. It feels solid, right up until it isn't. I still live in the same house. Same gravel drive, same workshop out back, same dog barking at anything that moves. Only difference now, I've got more than one way out. And sometimes, early in the morning, when the traffic's just starting to build and the light hits that road at the right angle, I'll stand there with a cup of coffee and watch it for a minute. Not because I enjoy the noise, but because I remember the silence and how quickly it can be taken away. So here's the question, and I'm genuinely curious what you think. Were they protecting their neighborhood, or just protecting their control? And when they lost it, did they deserve what happened next? Let me know in the comments, because depending on how you look at it, this story doesn't really have a clean ending.